Seen a long line of RVs and campers running through downtown San Diego today. It was all in support of a group of homeless people who are suing the city.
This isn't a warning anymore. It's already happening. Across the country, people are losing jobs, losing housing, and turning to RVs as a last line of survival. But now, that option is disappearing too, quietly, legally, overnight. What used to be temporary shelter is being treated like a crime, and millions don't see it coming yet. California hosts America's largest RV dwelling population, with over 150,000 people living in vehicles according to state housing estimates. Throughout 2024 and 2025, cities began aggressively enforcing overnight RV parking bans, vehicle habitation ordinances, and tow-away zones, particularly in coastal and high-rent regions. San Jose passed rules allowing RVs to be towed after 72 hours, even when occupied. Los Angeles expanded no oversized vehicle zones across hundreds of miles of streets, effectively eliminating legal RV parking throughout the city. Simultaneously, California lost over 400,000 tech, logistics, and service sector jobs since 2023. Median rent crossed $2,900 statewide, while average used RV prices dropped nearly 30%, revealing desperation selling among owners. Many RV residents report receiving multiple citations weekly, each ranging from $75 to $300, creating a devastating debt trap that leads directly to vehicle impoundment. Once an RV is impounded, retrieval fees typically exceed $2,000 to $4,000, more than many owners earn monthly. Shelters remain at capacity, wait lists stretch for months, and vehicle-safe parking programs serve only a small fraction of the need. California isn't technically banning RV living outright, but through sheer enforcement density, it's making survival functionally impossible. The result is mass displacement, forced migration away from cities, and a growing pipeline from RV living directly into street homelessness. California demonstrates how enforcement without alternatives doesn't solve homelessness. It simply removes the visible evidence while deepening the crisis. Oregon became the national flashpoint after the Grants Pass Supreme Court ruling reshaped how cities can enforce camping and vehicle habitation bans. Following this decision, Oregon municipalities rapidly adopted zero-tolerance enforcement policies, issuing fines for sleeping in vehicles or parking overnight, even when absolutely no shelter beds are available. In some cities, fines escalate daily, reaching $500 or more per week, leading directly to arrest warrants or vehicle seizure. Oregon's homelessness increased 22% in just 2 years, while the state lost over 120,000 jobs in construction, timber, and service industries. Median rent climbed past $1,800, despite wages remaining largely stagnant. RV dwellers, many of them retirees or recently laid-off workers, found themselves simultaneously pushed out of rest areas, industrial zones, and public streets. What makes Oregon uniquely alarming is the speed of change. Cities moved from tolerance to full enforcement in weeks, not years. Police departments have openly acknowledged that their goal is compliance through pressure, not actually rehousing people. RV residents consistently describe coordinated sweeps where notices are placed at dawn, followed by towing within 24 to 48 hours. Rural areas offer little refuge either. Counties have enacted roadside parking bans, and Forest Service land faces increasing restrictions. Oregon powerfully illustrates how a single legal shift can instantly transform survival into criminality, without adding housing, funding, or genuine alternatives for displaced residents. Washington state once promoted safe parking programs for vehicle dwellers, but by 2025, most programs are severely over capacity or completely defunded. Seattle estimates over 11,000 people currently living in vehicles, yet fewer than 1,200 safe parking spaces exist statewide. As a direct result, enforcement has intensified dramatically, especially around transit corridors, industrial areas, and waterfront zones. Washington lost more than 180,000 jobs tied to logistics slowdowns, port automation, and retail closures. RV dwellers, many of them former dock workers and warehouse employees, now face strict time-limited parking rules, often just 2 to 4 hours, making sleep literally illegal by default. Ticketing averages $47 per citation, but repeat violations lead quickly to booting and towing. Local governments consistently justify enforcement using public safety language, but outreach workers confirm shelter placement rates under 10% for RV residents. Once towed, RVs are frequently destroyed rather than auctioned due to age and condition, instantly eliminating people's only housing. Washington's crisis highlights a fundamental structural mismatch. Vehicle homelessness is rising far faster than policy adaptation can address. The state isn't actually removing homelessness. It's removing mobility, trapping people in escalating debt cycles and forcing them into foot-based homelessness. Washington demonstrates how well-intentioned programs, when underfunded and overwhelmed, ultimately give way to pure enforcement, leaving vulnerable residents with nowhere to turn legally. New York rarely associates homelessness with RVs, but vehicle dwelling has surged quietly across the state. Outside New York City, particularly on Long Island, along upstate corridors, and on industrial outskirts, local municipalities enforce anti-camping and overnight parking laws with increasing frequency. Many towns ban sleeping in vehicles outright, regardless of location or circumstance. New York lost over 300,000 jobs in finance support, retail, and healthcare administration following 2023. Median rent outside NYC crossed $2,000, while property taxes rose sharply. RV dwellers, often seniors or gig economy workers, report being pushed systematically from town to town, receiving warnings without any referral services or assistance. Unlike Western states with centralized policies, New York's enforcement is fragmented. Each municipality acts completely independently, creating a confusing maze of conflicting rules. RV residents can unknowingly violate ordinances simply by crossing a city line. Police issue move-along orders multiple times per night, making rest physically impossible. New York's crisis remains hidden by population density and optics, but the outcome is identical. RV living is treated as public disorder rather than economic displacement, and enforcement consistently replaces assistance. The state's approach reveals how homelessness can escalate invisibly when fragmented local enforcement replaces coordinated housing solutions. New York demonstrates that vehicle homelessness doesn't require Western landscapes. It's growing wherever housing costs exceed incomes, even in places that refuse to acknowledge its existence. Florida enacted one of America's strictest anti-camping frameworks in recent history. In 2024 and 2025, new state laws prohibited sleeping in vehicles or public spaces statewide unless explicitly permitted by local ordinance. Cities gained sweeping authority to fine, arrest, or forcibly relocate RV dwellers with absolutely no shelter requirement. Florida's population grew, but wages didn't keep pace. The state lost nearly 250,000 jobs in construction slowdowns, insurance industry collapses, and tourism volatility. Meanwhile, rents surged 35% since 2021, and insurance costs doubled, pushing retirees and working families into RVs as a last resort. Under new enforcement, RV dwellers face misdemeanor criminal charges, not merely tickets. This introduces permanent criminal records, systematically blocking future employment and housing applications. Counties closed informal RV clusters near beaches, ports, and service roads, areas where people previously parked close to work. Florida demonstrates the harshest version of the national trend, explicitly turning homelessness into a law enforcement issue rather than acknowledging it as housing failure. Once criminalized, escape becomes nearly impossible. Criminal records follow people forever, creating barriers to employment, rental applications, and social services. Florida's approach reveals how some states are choosing punishment over solutions, using legal mechanisms to make poverty itself illegal. The state shows what happens when enforcement becomes the primary response to economic displacement. People don't disappear, they simply sink deeper into impossible situations. Texas presents itself as affordable, but by 2025, it has developed one of the fastest-growing RV homeless populations. Major metros including Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio expanded no camping and no vehicle sleeping ordinances, enforced through highly coordinated police sweeps. RVs parked near job centers, oil service roads, and warehouse districts are routinely cited or towed. Texas lost over 210,000 jobs tied to tech layoffs, trucking slowdowns, and oil field contractions. While rents remain lower than coastal states, they still jumped 27% since 2021, far outpacing wage growth. Many RV dwellers are former tradespeople who lost employer-provided housing or could no longer qualify for leases due to credit damage. What separates Texas is enforcement intensity. Some cities issue multiple citations in a single night, stacking fines exceeding $1,000 within days. Counties authorize immediate towing for public nuisance, even when vehicles are legally registered and fully operable. Shelter access is extremely limited and often requires surrendering vehicles entirely, making it unusable for RV residents. Once an RV is towed, storage fees accumulate at $40 to $75 per day, quickly exceeding the vehicle's actual value. Texas doesn't remove homelessness. It systematically extracts remaining assets, accelerating total financial collapse for working-class RV dwellers. Texas demonstrates how enforcement creates a one-way economic trap. Each citation, each tow, each storage fee pushes people further from stability, making recovery impossible while generating revenue from poverty itself. Arizona's RV homelessness crisis is uniquely driven by climate and migration patterns. As rents exploded, Phoenix saw a 40% rent increase in just 4 years. Thousands turned to RV living as their only option. In response, cities enacted strict parking duration limits and vehicle habitation bans, especially near residential zones. Arizona lost 95,000 jobs in real estate, retail, and hospitality corrections. Many RV dwellers are seniors on fixed incomes fleeing higher-cost states. Enforcement intensified even during declared heat emergencies, paradoxically pushing RVs away from shaded or serviced areas. Some municipalities restrict parking to just 2 hours, even overnight, making sleep completely impossible. Police departments cite safety concerns, yet they tow RVs during extreme heat conditions, where interior temperatures can exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Cooling centers exist, but explicitly prohibit vehicles from their premises. Arizona's crisis shows a deadly contradiction: severe environmental risk combined with absolute policy rigidity. RV living becomes not only illegal, but physically dangerous, with no legal refuge available during climate extremes. The state demonstrates how enforcement policies can become lethal when combined with extreme weather. People face an impossible choice: break the law to survive heat, or comply with regulations and risk heat-related illness or death. Arizona's approach reveals how homelessness policy can ignore basic human survival needs, treating housing displacement as a legal problem while disregarding life-threatening environmental realities affecting the most vulnerable populations. Colorado's economy remained strong on paper, but housing costs completely shattered economic stability. Median rent exceeded $2,100, while service and construction jobs fell by 110,000 statewide. RV living expanded rapidly along Front Range cities as working people lost housing access. Colorado enforces urban camping bans aggressively, even when residents maintain employment. RV dwellers report being ticketed directly outside job sites and industrial parks where they work. Fines escalate rapidly into arrest warrants, leading to arrests completely unrelated to any crime. Safe parking programs exist, but serve less than 5% of vehicle dwellers. Many programs require background checks, strict curfews, and employment verification, systematically excluding those most at risk. Colorado's approach explicitly criminalizes the working poor, people with jobs, registered vehicles, and valid licenses, but no lease. The state powerfully illustrates how employment no longer guarantees housing security and enforcement specifically punishes survival. Colorado demonstrates a troubling reality. You can work full-time, follow laws, maintain vehicle registration, and still become homeless and criminalized. The state shows how America's housing crisis has fundamentally broken the connection between work and stability. Employment once meant security. Now it simply means you're working homeless instead of unemployed homeless. Colorado's enforcement reveals how cities are choosing to punish economic displacement rather than address its root causes. Working people aren't failing. The system designed to support them through employment has completely failed. North Carolina's RV homelessness crisis is quieter, but steadily expanding across the state. Manufacturing layoffs removed over 85,000 jobs, while housing costs rose 24% since 2020. Cities restrict overnight vehicle sleeping through zoning and trespass laws applied inconsistently. Rest areas explicitly prohibit overnight stays, forcing RVs onto city streets, where local ordinances immediately ban them. Police issue warnings instead of citations initially, but repeat encounters escalate very quickly. North Carolina's primary issue isn't visibility, it's complete lack of data and support systems. No statewide tracking exists for vehicle homelessness. allowing enforcement to proceed without scrutiny or accountability. RV dwellers disappear town by town without documentation. The state demonstrates how homelessness can escalate when nobody is counting. Without data, there's no accountability, no funding justification, and no public awareness. North Carolina's quiet approach allows the crisis to worsen invisibly. This pattern reveals a dangerous truth. Some states are choosing not to measure homelessness, not because the problem doesn't exist, but because measurement would require response. By not tracking vehicle homelessness, North Carolina avoids confronting its scale and severity. The state shows how enforcement can proceed systematically when there's no public record, no media attention, and no political pressure for solutions. RV residents are pushed out incrementally, displaced without documentation, creating a crisis that officially doesn't exist because nobody is watching or counting the disappeared. Pennsylvania lost 140,000 jobs tied to logistics automation, warehouse closures, and healthcare restructuring. As rents climbed above $1,700, RV living expanded along former industrial corridors where jobs once existed. Municipalities enforce no overnight parking, no vehicle habitation, and trespass laws aggressively. Unlike Western states with storage systems, Pennsylvania's towing is fast and final. RVs are often immediately scrapped rather than stored, eliminating housing permanently. Pennsylvania's crisis directly reflects post-industrial America. Stable jobs vanish, housing costs tighten, and enforcement fills the gap left by economic policy. RV homelessness becomes a one-way door, from housed to displaced to completely erased. The state demonstrates how deindustrialization creates homelessness decades later. The jobs lost weren't just employment, they were entire community economic foundations. When factories closed, they took housing stability with them. Pennsylvania shows what happens when economic transformation happens without social support. The state once offered working-class stability through manufacturing. Now those same communities face homelessness as factories become abandoned shells. Former workers who built American products now live in RVs parked outside closed facilities. Pennsylvania's enforcement approach reveals a bitter irony. The state is removing the vehicles of people displaced by the very economic changes that enriched others. The workers who lost jobs to automation now lose their homes to enforcement. Pennsylvania demonstrates how America is criminalizing the victims of its own economic transformation, punishing displacement instead of addressing its causes. Illinois reflects a growing Midwest crisis often completely ignored in national media coverage. Since 2023, Illinois shed over 160,000 jobs, primarily in freight logistics, retail, and manufacturing support roles. While Chicago remains expensive, suburban and downstate areas saw sharp rent increases without corresponding wage growth. Median rents climbed 22% statewide, pushing working households toward vehicle living. Local governments responded by aggressively tightening anti-camping ordinances, zoning restrictions, and park enforcement. RV dwellers are often cited under public nuisance laws rather than simple parking violations, escalating penalties faster. In many municipalities, repeated citations trigger vehicle seizure under habitual offense statutes. Illinois also strictly restricts rest area use, leaving RV residents trapped between prohibited zones. Shelters rarely accommodate vehicles, and brutal winter conditions eliminate outdoor alternatives entirely. Once an RV is impounded, recovery costs commonly exceed $3,000, more than the vehicle's entire resale value. Illinois demonstrates how colder states weaponize climate itself. Enforcement during winter months effectively forces immediate compliance or total collapse. RV living becomes untenable not because of law alone, but because time, cold, and debt converge simultaneously. The state reveals how Midwest enforcement differs from coastal patterns. While Western states debate policy, Midwest states simply enforce existing laws more aggressively, using winter as a compliance weapon. Illinois shows how seasonal enforcement creates urgency that warm weather states don't experience, compressing timelines and eliminating survival options. Michigan's housing crisis intensified dramatically as auto-related layoffs spread beyond factories into suppliers and logistics firms. The state lost over 120,000 jobs between 2022 and 2025. As inflation surged, heating costs and insurance premiums spiked, making traditional housing completely unsustainable for many households. RV living emerged as a last defense, but Michigan municipalities restrict overnight vehicle use aggressively. Cities expanded winter enforcement protocols, citing public safety and snow removal operations. RVs parked on streets during snowfall face immediate towing, regardless of occupancy. Safe parking programs are virtually non-existent outside Detroit and Grand Rapids. Rural counties enforce strict road use restrictions that prohibit overnight stops. RV dwellers face a binary choice: move constantly or lose the vehicle permanently. Michigan's crisis highlights a brutal reality. In cold weather states, RV homelessness has absolutely no seasonal tolerance. Survival strategies used successfully elsewhere simply don't work when temperatures drop. Once winter enforcement begins, displacement accelerates rapidly. Michigan demonstrates how climate makes vehicle homelessness uniquely dangerous in northern states. RVs offer no protection against sub-zero temperatures without power hookups. The state is essentially enforcing a choice between freezing or losing housing entirely. Michigan's approach reveals how northern states are pushing vehicle dwellers toward impossible decisions. You can't legally park, you can't survive the cold without parking, and you can't access shelter without surrendering your vehicle. Michigan shows how enforcement in harsh climates doesn't just criminalize homelessness, it creates life-threatening situations. New Jersey combines extreme population density with aggressive local control. The state lost nearly 90,000 jobs, while median rent surpassed $2,300, one of the highest outside California and New York. RV living increased along industrial edges, ports, and highway corridors. Municipalities responded with strict zoning enforcement, banning overnight vehicle presence in commercial and mixed-use zones. Police issue citations under loitering, trespass, and public health codes, often stacking violations from multiple different statutes simultaneously. Because towns are tightly packed, RV residents are pushed repeatedly across municipal borders, unknowingly violating new rules. There is no statewide protection or coordination. Once cited in multiple towns, vehicles can be flagged for seizure. New Jersey's crisis is administrative warfare. Not one law, but hundreds of local rules acting simultaneously. RV homelessness becomes impossible to navigate legally. The state demonstrates how density creates unique enforcement challenges. You can drive 5 miles and cross 4 jurisdictions, each with different rules. Compliance becomes impossible when regulations change every few miles. New Jersey reveals how fragmented local control can create systematic displacement even without state-level policy. Each town acts independently, but collectively they create an impenetrable web of regulations. RV dwellers can't track which rules apply where, leading to inadvertent violations and escalating penalties. New Jersey shows how administrative complexity itself becomes enforcement. The state doesn't need harsh laws. It has overlapping jurisdictions that make legal survival impossible through sheer regulatory density. Virginia's RV homelessness crisis is growing fastest in places never designed to see it: suburban counties and commuter belts. Since 2023, Virginia lost over 100,000 jobs, largely tied to federal contracting slowdowns, IT services, and administrative support roles. These were stable, middle-income jobs that once supported rent and mortgages reliably. When they disappeared, housing insecurity followed rapidly. RV living began appearing near park-and-ride lots, office parks, warehouse access roads, and undeveloped parcels close to employment centers. Counties responded not with housing programs, but with zoning-based enforcement. By classifying RV dwelling as unauthorized land use, local governments bypass criminal courts entirely and move straight to towing and removal. This method is significantly faster and harder to challenge legally. Vehicles can be removed as zoning violations within 24 to 48 hours, with no requirement to offer shelter or alternatives. Unlike cities with visible encampments, suburban enforcement happens quietly, often overnight, keeping the issue completely out of public view. Virginia's shelter system is not designed for vehicle dwellers. Many programs prohibit RVs entirely, forcing residents to abandon their only form of housing to qualify for help. Once an RV is impounded, recovery costs often exceed $2,500, making retrieval impossible. Virginia demonstrates how suburban America handles homelessness: out of sight, out of reach, and out of options entirely. Massachusetts has one of the nation's highest costs of living, and by 2025, the gap between income and housing became completely unbridgeable for many residents. Median rent surpassed $2,600, while layoffs in healthcare administration, education, biotech support, and media eliminated more than 95,000 jobs. For many residents, RV living became the absolute last defense against total homelessness. Cities responded with environmental, sanitation, and public health enforcement rather than housing expansion. RVs are frequently classified as health hazards or illegal encampments, allowing accelerated removal timelines. Notices can be as short as 12 to 24 hours, after which vehicles are towed or blocked in. Massachusetts differs in its justification. Enforcement is framed as environmental protection, not public order. This makes legal challenges harder and enforcement faster. RVs are removed before outreach workers can even intervene, and many are immediately scrapped rather than stored. Shelter systems are over capacity, and winter protocols prioritize indoor beds, excluding vehicle residents entirely. Once displaced, RV dwellers are pushed out of metro areas, often forced to leave the state completely. Massachusetts shows how high-income states export homelessness, removing the visible problem instead of solving the underlying cause. The state demonstrates how environmental and health regulations can be weaponized to accelerate displacement without acknowledging housing failure. Massachusetts reveals that liberal states can enforce just as aggressively as conservative ones. They simply use different legal frameworks. Ohio represents the quietest phase of the RV homelessness crisis. Between 2022 and 2025, the state lost approximately 130,000 jobs, driven by retail collapse, manufacturing consolidation, and logistics automation. As wages stagnated and rents climbed above $1,600, vehicle living expanded across river corridors, industrial edges, and small cities. Unlike coastal states, Ohio's response has been largely invisible. There are no statewide protections, no comprehensive tracking of vehicle homelessness, and minimal media coverage. Local governments enforce anti-sleeping, trespass, and overnight parking laws incrementally, systematically pushing RV dwellers from town to town. Police typically issue warnings first, followed by citations, then towing. Because enforcement is fragmented across municipalities, RV residents accumulate violations unknowingly. Once a vehicle is flagged repeatedly, seizure becomes inevitable. Ohio's shelters rarely accommodate RV residents, and outreach programs lack resources. The result is displacement without documentation. RVs disappear from streets, not because people are housed, but because they are forced out, stripped of vehicles, or erased from records. Ohio illustrates the most dangerous stage of the crisis: homelessness without visibility, where enforcement succeeds precisely because no one is watching. The state shows what happens when displacement becomes routine and invisible. People don't disappear because problems are solved. They disappear because they've been systematically removed from view without solutions, documentation, or accountability. This isn't the future anymore. It's the moment everything starts breaking. If this reality scares you, or if you've lived it yourself, say it in the comments, because silence is exactly how this keeps spreading. And watch our next video where we uncover the hidden laws and decisions pushing millions closer to the edge.